Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I can't believe that it is finally April. I feel like that first quarter of the year just felt so long. So I'm definitely excited and ready to be in spring. I feel like that always improves everyone's moods. It kind of feels like a fresh start. We can do some spring cleaning, all of that stuff. But today I'm going to be doing an update on my two project pans that I have going on. So I have my makeup project pan, and so that's where I'm working on 5 makeup products at a time, and I'm trying to either completely use them up or I have a different goal of maybe just hitting pan in that project, depending on what it is. And then my second project update is going to be my Pan Those Eyeshadows project pan. So I'm working on 5 eyeshadow palettes, and I chose randomly using a pretty random app on my phone from a list of all the colors of eyeshadows in my collection and just kind of matched them up that way. So it ended up being from 5 different palettes. So we'll do an update on that today and excitingly get to choose maybe 1 or 2 new shades to start working on. So if you want to see all those updates, then just keep watching. So let's start with the makeup project pan, and the first thing I'll talk about is my Hourglass 6 pan palette. I had the goal at the beginning of the year of trying to pan this whole palette this year. At this rate, I don't think that's going to happen, even though these pans are smaller, but I've been mostly working on the bronzer. That's what I currently have rolled in. And so again, I feel like it is hard to tell from these angles, but I definitely think you can see how flat it is compared to the other ones. It's not as domed anymore. And when we look up close, the pan is definitely, it's hard to see because the pan's like the same color as the product. The pan is pretty much all along the edge. And so we're definitely flattening that, getting more and more pan every use. So I think that's definitely progress made. It's just hard to compare the progress in this style of packaging. So you can kind of see there how much less of a dome that the bronzer on the end has. So we're just gonna keep chugging along with that. And then I have pulled in these 2 blushes just in my everyday makeup drawer to start getting some use and progress on those 2 colors. And then I also have been using this kind of more like setting or like diffusing powder almost on a daily basis. I like that. And then I have used these 2 highlight shades just a handful of times here and there. So just trying to make progress on the palette in general, but I would love to use up the bronzer and maybe start making my way through maybe this powder, the like setting powder shade, because that would be easier to use up and kind of going from there. So we'll see where we're at next month with that, but that is progress being made slowly but surely. So next we'll talk about the cream bronzer. So I have cream bronzer and the powder bronzer. The cream bronzer I'm working on is my Chanel Soleil Tan de Chanel. And for this product, I just have a goal of hitting pan. This is one of the oldest products in my collection and it's quite hefty, but I definitely think that I have increased the indent going on in here, the dip. It's again, the packaging and the coloring is making it hard to see quite how far down the dip actually goes, but I like that you can actually see it, and that gives me hope that I will maybe hit pan sooner rather than later. But this past month, March, was the first month that this had been rolled in, so I just kind of reminded myself of how much I enjoy this product. If you go a little heavy-handed, it can come off a little on the orange side, but I usually put my cream bronzer on first and then I do my foundation on top of it, kind of like underpainting, and I think that kind of helps tone down the oranginess a little bit. But it is very creamy. It still blends out really well considering how old this is in my collection, and I'm just glad that I am going to be getting some use and hitting some pan on this soon. Next we have my setting powder. It's the CoverGirl Clean Fresh Powder. I feel like I'm not seeing a ton of progress in this. Maybe when I put up the picture from last month, I'll kind of realize that the pan is bigger than I think it is. But this is just slow going because I just don't use a lot of powder when I'm setting my face. I've said it a million times before. I usually just do my T-zone and then maybe like under my eyes. So I'm just not picking up a ton of powder. I also feel like this is maybe getting a little bit of hard pan. And so I feel like I'm not picking up a lot when I get my brush in there. So maybe I just kind of need to scrape the top off and start fresh. I don't know. I'm not ready to repress it yet, but I definitely, you can see the indents of the rest of the rings, and, I'm going to try and start working my way this way to make the pan exposure bigger. So hard to comment on that when I haven't really looked at the pictures from last month yet. And like I said, it just feels like this one's really slow going, but it's pretty much a translucent shade, so it works for just the T-zone, so it's good for that. And I do enjoy using the product, so we will just keep chugging along on this. The next product, we are so close to being done. I'm pretty excited. It is my e.l.f. Plumping Gloss in Champagne Glam. We are all the way down to the E in e.l.f., which I think is pretty exciting. I thought maybe I'd be able to finish it by the end of March, but that was just kind of pushing it too hard. But with this little left, I definitely will finish it next month. So that's exciting. And I did take the stopper out as well. So there's no stopper. So you can see it's, I'm going to be able to get every little last drop out of there, which I always try to do with my products. And it will just be exciting to have another empty to add to my yearly empties of makeup products. My goal is to use up 25 products in 2025, whether through project panning in this project or just organic use in my everyday drawer. Regardless of how it happens, my goal is 25 products. So hopefully this will be added by the end of next month. I definitely think it can be. I just realized I've also been failing at telling you how many uses I had on each of the products, so we'll go back and do that really quickly. Sorry for it being out of order. The bronzer from the Hourglass palette, I used this 18 times in March. All of these I've used 18 times. I think the Chanel bronzer 18 times. The CoverGirl powder I actually have used more. I've used that 19 times because sometimes I do just do a touch up. And then the gloss I also used 19 times because, like I said, I do reapply this during the day occasionally, so multiple uses a day. So that's where we're with that. The last product that I was working on is an empty. I always love having an empty to share with you in these update videos. It was my Benefit Precisely My Brow Pencil. This was just a mini one in the shade 3. So it was like a tad dark for me, but there really wasn't much left in last month's update. So I ended up using this up with 12 uses in March. So it took 12 more uses to use this up. So that is very exciting. So that means that we get to roll in a new product to replace this with. And I don't have a rule in my project pan that I have to replace an item with that exact same item. So instead, I have decided to go back to an item that I have had in my project pan before and that I'm still making good progress on. And I just want to put it back in the project and have it be a success of this project. And it is my ColourPop highlighter in Lunch Money. So definitely a ton of pan going on. Really, it's just the sides that are left. And I just really enjoy this highlighter. It just kind of gives you that glowy sheen without being too gold or too white or too pearlescent. It's just that nice champagne neutral shade that goes with your skin tone. So I'm excited to roll this in and make some progress on that. I also think it's important when you're project panning, it helps if you pick some kind of give me products. So that's kind of what the lip gloss is. I know I can use this up in a shorter time frame because that's just the nature of the product. I have a better chance of using up this ColourPop highlighter quickly because of how much progress already exists in the pan. So that I kind of like to do that to help myself stay motivated and also to just eventually work through some of your products. So that is exciting. So now let's move on to the eyeshadow palette updates. All right, so the eyeshadow palette update is also an exciting one because I did finally hit pan on one of the shades. And then I also have made the decision to roll out one of the shades that I'm working on because it just is seemingly impossible to hit pan on it realistically, and I would like to make progress on other shades and give myself different options. But let's start with the 3 shades that are staying in the rotation. So the first comes from my Alter Ego Sahara palette, and it is this kind of gray shade called Slate. Well, I'll do it the way that you can read the word slate. So it's hard to tell, but I definitely have made some progress. It's looking, rougher in there. You can tell that there's been use. I don't see a huge dip in there, but also that shade is quite pigmented and dark. And so I kind of have been using that. It's just like I tap my brush ever so lightly in there and start my crease deepening. But I don't want to go too heavy with it because then it gets really dark gray and then it kind of starts to give you that like bruised look. And that's not what I'm going for. So I kind of just use it as the base to start my crease. So I'm going to keep this in because I do think I'm making progress on it and I just want to see if I do hit pan and what these pans look like. The next shade that's staying in that I'm going to keep working on is from my Sigma New Mod palette, and it is this shade on the end, Glam. And you can definitely see some progress in there. We've got a little dip going. This is a really great all over lid shade, and that's pretty much how I've been using it. It works really well. I enjoy that like kind of pinky brown shimmer neutral. It works really well for everyday looks, which I'm happy about. So that is going to be staying in. So that's a good lid shade. So let me put a swatch of that slate on here too, so we can kind of get an idea of what our color story is going to be. And the third shade that's going to be staying in is from my Natasha Denona Mini Sunset palette. And it is this shade all the way on the end called Halo. And this has been really great as an inner corner highlight. You could also use this as an all over lid shade, but since I've already got that Sigma one, this is a really great inner corner highlight. So I think, again, you can kind of see a dip going in there. So I'm going to keep this one in. The Natasha Denona shadows are pretty soft. So I feel like I can hit pan on this sooner rather than later. So I'm going to keep this in because I do think that it's a possibility. So the two shades that I'm going to roll out, the first is from my Milani Gilded Mini Palette in Whiskey Business, and it is this second shade. I used this shade a total of 30 times in the past 2 months, and there isn't even like a dip showing. It's just so tightly packed, so pigmented that a little goes a long way. And so I just don't feel like it's realistic to keep it in and expect to hit pan. So it went really well with everything, but it just isn't seeming realistic, and I don't want to spend a lot of time making progress on just one shade when I could maybe be using that time on multiple other shades. So we're going to roll this out and pick something new. But then the second shade that we're going to roll out is one that I actually did hit pan on, and it was from my Urban Decay Ultimate Basics palette, and it was this shade Lethal on this top row. It's going to be really hard to see the pan if it's even going to show up on the camera, but it's in there. The pan I think is darker than what I thought it was going to be because I think I hit it a couple days ago, and then I was like, is that pan? Is that not pan? And then the next time I used it, I was like, that's definitely pan. But I was using it mostly as a liner, so that's why it was easier to hit pan, because I was kind of going into the same spot with a really fine point brush. So that's exciting. It worked really well as a liner shade. So it would kind of be cool if I got another shade that could work like that. But if not, I have tons of liners as well. So that was the color story that we were working with, which I think was really nice to start out with. But now I'm excited to pick some new shades. So I pulled up my Pretty Random app on my phone, and I also deleted the 2 rows of shades in my spreadsheet of the 2 that I'm taking out so that they don't get chosen again. And so the first shade that I chose was shade 54, which on my spreadsheet corresponds to the ABH Sultry palette. So we're getting a whole new palette, and it is the shade Cyborg, this silver shade. So I do think this shade is really pretty. I just don't know how well that's going to work for everyday looks. But it does kind of go, we're getting a cooler toned color story. So, you know, I think we can make it work if we keep it toned down. But I love this palette, so I'm excited to pull it in, even if it's for a shade that might be a little more difficult for me to use. But I think it will inspire me to use other shades in this palette, and so I'll just get more use out of it in general that way. So that is the first shade that we're rolling in. And then I did the Pretty Random app again and got the shade 78. And so on my spreadsheet, that corresponds to my Sigma Warm Wishes palette, and it was the shade Mulled Wine. Ooh, so this actually might work out. It's this shade right here, Mulled Wine. So that I think I could use as a liner again. So that is actually working out really well so far. I don't know if it's just because I have a boring eyeshadow palette collection, and so I'm kind of getting these more neutral color stories, but that's fine with me. I can make that work for everyday looks. I do work in a traditional office setting 9 to 5 during the week, so I'm not trying to do like super colorful makeup looks. I need something that's wearable and neutral and everyday, and so I definitely feel like I can make that happen with these 5 shades. So that is very exciting. I feel relief at that, and yeah. That is all my updates. We are making progress in these projects, using the things that we already have, finding new ways to use them, rediscovering how much we enjoy them. That's something I'm really passionate about right now in my life, is just being content with what you have, making sure that you're getting good use out of the things you have, and just kind of understanding your consumption habits and the way that advertising and social media is making you feel like you have to overconsume these things when you really don't. So I encourage you to make smart purchasing choices. I'm not saying never purchase anything again that makes you happy. I still buy new makeup even though I have plenty to last me a lifetime, but just not overdoing it and then making sure that I'm enjoying what I've already spent my hard-earned money on. So I hope you enjoyed this update. Please give this video a thumbs up to let me know that you did. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're updated of all of my upcoming videos, which includes Shop My Stash videos, Project Pan updates like this one. Sometimes I do little theme-inspired looks, and then next week, since it's the end of a quarter, I'm going to do my quarterly empties video, so you can see everything that I used up January through March, makeup, skincare, hair care wise, in next week's video, so be sure to come back for that. Thanks, and I will see you next time.